Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Keep the Line Moving, the podcast designed to talk about leadership, life, and inspiration. I am your host, Chris Gargano, and today's topic is authentic leadership. This is a rich conversation, and I'm so glad you're part of it. Our guest this week is Raven Jemison. She's the Executive Vice President of the Milwaukee Bucks in charge of business operations. Her resume is beyond impressive. Listen to this. She spent time with the Florida Panthers, the Pittsburgh Pirates, the San Francisco 49ers, the NBA League Office, and now the Bucks. This is her fourth season. Here are some awards that she's been recognized for. 2021 Adweek Most Powerful Woman in Sports. 2022 Sports Business Journal Game Changer. 2023 Outsports Power 100. She's also the author of a book which is released today. The title is More Than Representation, The Cheat Codes to Own Your Seat at the Table. Congratulations to Raven. We'll talk about the writing of the book, the key takeaways from the book, and I tell you what, they are all valuable. The conversation begins now with Raven Jemison. Raven, it is wonderful to see you. So the season's off to a pretty good start, right? Not perfect, but very good. How do you feel about the Bucs season so far?
You know, I am very optimistic, but I've been in this business long enough to know that it's a very long season. I have no control, so we're just going to ride it day by day by day and hope that the wins accumulate such that we are in the conversation in June.
So, Raven, you talk about experiences with seasons. You've had many of them. Yeah. You've been in the NHL, the NFL, Major League Baseball, the league office. So how do you approach every season, right? I remember for myself, it was like I literally had to gear up physically, mentally, emotionally to start a season. How do you do it?
You know, it's interesting, Chris, because I often get this question, what are you doing in the off season? Like, are you on vacation for months at a time, or are you in Greece with Giannis, or whatever it may be? The truth is the off season is the business's busy season, right? So when you think about preparing for the following season, we started doing that well in advance of the off season, and the off season tends to be the time to fine tune and make sure you're A++ when the season starts. So as far as gearing up, there is that mental aspect that you're like, okay, it's nice to have an off season, get some rest, but you're also ready to get started. I am fortunate to work for a winning franchise now, but I have not always been blessed to be able to do that in terms of having a winning team on the field, the ice, the pitch, the court, whatever you want to call it. And I do believe that there is something about that anticipation that you cannot take for granted. Having a longer off season is sometimes detrimental, in my opinion, because you're just sitting, waiting, and the anticipation is just that. But I will say, yes, you absolutely have to gear yourself up to be ready because, you know, working in an arena, for example, you have games, you have concerts, you have clients, you have all the things that, you know, you have to think about operationally to make sure you're mentally prepared for such that you can physically take on the demands. But there's definitely something to be said about preparing yourself off the court to get ready for what's ahead. And it is, sometimes it's long. It's a long season for sure. But like I said earlier, one day at a time.
Well said. And a couple of years ago, you had the ultimate long season in that championship over the Suns. And what did that feel like when that final buzzer went off and the celebration ensued? What was it like to be a world champion in the great sport, the NBA?
Yeah, Chris. So I started with the Bucks February of 21. Okay, so if people can put their mind back to that crazy time, COVID was very real. I started the Bucks with 0 fans in the building. So we got approved to have 300 fans in the building. And we thought, oh my God, it's time. We're getting ready to really have fans in the building. And then that ramps up. It ramps up to 1,500, then 7,000, then 16,000. So that 6-month time frame from February to July, I guess it's around 6 months, it felt like 12 months because the ability to turn over a manifest and social distance seating and testing and all the things that happened during that magical season definitely took up a lot of time and a lot of energy. And we had a great team on it from start to finish. Very blessed to be a part of that group, especially my first season with the Bucks. But you can't really put into words what happens when the final buzzer sounds and you're being crowned champions. It's magical, but I think it meant so much more to the team, of course, the team on the court, but also the team off the court, because what we had to do to get ready for that moment to make sure that we had the best home court advantage in all of sports, which is what I tell our team is our job. We had 16,000, 17,000 people in the building. We had a lot of people, I won't say a number, outside the building in the Deer District. And it meant, yes, we won a championship, the first one in 50 years, but it also was something about that entire group, that and all those fans coming together after being pent up in the house during COVID, right? It was
Right.
just something magical. I try to explain it as best as I can, but it meant so much more than just a championship, if it makes sense. It meant a community coming together, rallying around a team that was down 0-2, coming back to Milwaukee and winning 4 straight, and having the Bucks and 6 mantra actually mean something, which, the team had been saying for years, Bucks and 6, Bucks and 6, but we actually made it happen. And there's just so many things that happen at the right time, in the right moments, for that to just feel magical. So if I had to describe it in one way, I'd say magical.
Wonderful word,
Yeah.
really. And so you get there in February of 21, and you're in charge of all business operations, Raven. So
Yeah.
what was it like to get adjusted to the team side again, right? Because you'd been with the Florida Panthers, the 49ers, the Pittsburgh Pirates, but now you're with the Bucks and you're overseeing all business operations. So that adjustment, you win the championship in your first year. What's it been like since? And how has your team grown? And how's it to be a leader of a champion, a recent champion, and a competitive team each and every year?
Yeah. Well, the good news of sports, but it's also kind of the bittersweet part of sports, is you start at 0 every year, right? When you think about on the court, for example, we had won a championship. We had the shortest offseason in history, going from the 2021 season to the 21-22 season. We didn't have much time to really think about the celebration. We had the parade. We were getting ready for the ring ceremony, opening night. And when you think about the fact that you start 0-0, 0 and 0, and then the business is kind of starting all over again, that's what I love about sports, right? Because you have a chance to redefine and rethink how you do everything moving forward. Just because it worked last year, just because it was magical last year, how do we replicate that? Sure, in some spaces, but how do we evolve and innovate and not rest on our laurels and just think that there's a guarantee that we're going to win another championship, one, or there's a guarantee that we're going to hit every goal just because our team is producing on the court. And it's the thing about business, sports business in particular, that I love, but is also challenging, is I have nothing to do with what happens on the court. That following year, we lost in the playoffs. And then this past year, we lost in the first round. And what I love about, again, overseeing all of the business is kind of getting the team to think about what our job is, why we do what we do every day, such that we can produce the best possible environment for our team to be successful on the court. But once the ball is tipped, that's it, right? So to oversee business operations for the Bucks simply means, to me, putting our team in the best possible position to be able to do that. We have very smart people, very smart and capable. They push me every single day. And it's really making sure they have the resources to be successful, and then getting the heck out of the way so they can do what they do to produce the magic off the court.
Wonderful. And Raven, I was having lunch yesterday with somebody who's been in the NBA many years. I
Yeah.
brought your name up and they lit up and said many great things about you. Wanted to
Thank
share
you.
that with you.
Thank you,
And
Chris.
you're very welcome. Let's look at it this way. So let's drill down now. So your leadership style to get your group, the business entities within the Bucks, to think that way, right?
Mhm.
We have to prove ourselves each and every day. We have to prove ourselves each and every season. What is your leadership style and philosophy to make sure that that happens by way of communication, by way of empowering? How do
Yeah.
you do it? There's a lot of young people out there,
Yeah.
anybody actually, of all ages, listening to this and wanting to know that magic.
Yeah. Well, if I had the magic, I would definitely bottle it up, and I'd probably be much richer than I currently am. But that being said, my philosophy, honestly, Chris, is to let folks do what they do, give them the resources to be able to do that, listen, I go back to my early sales days when my first boss said, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. I think that applies to sales. And I think that also applies to leadership. If you're not listening to what your team needs, if you're not listening such that you can make the decision to, again, put them in a position to be successful, you're already losing. If you don't have the right people in place, of course, you're already losing. But I think what I am blessed to have at the Bucks in particular is a group that knows what the mission is. And fortunately, we have leaders that have been with the team when the team wasn't so good, right? So they have that perspective to be like, what we have right now is special. Let's bottle it up. Let's optimize. And I always say optimize and maximize. And in particular, I mean, how do you take advantage of the moment, but think about the future moments, right? We know sports is cyclical. I would love to think that the Bucks or whatever team I work for is going to win championships every year. But as I've said, I've been with the team. This is now my 4th season and we've only won 1 championship. That doesn't mean that our job stops, right? So, in terms of my leadership philosophy, I like to think that I'm an empathetic leader, but I do push. I think very much about my time playing sports. I was an athlete for quite some time. I still struggle with the fact that I'm not one anymore as I battle on the Peloton against myself every morning. But I do think that playing sports and having people that around me have worked in sports, that team mentality, that camaraderie, and that mission focused, how do we win off the court, is still very prevalent in my leadership style. So I'm fortunate enough that it resonates with people. But I'm learning every day on how I can be a better leader. And I want to tell people out there in particular that just because you've made it to whatever level you think you should be at or wherever you want to be, doesn't mean that you stop learning. It doesn't mean that you don't learn from the people that you are leading. I have made many mistakes in leadership, but the beauty is I try not to make the same mistake twice, because that's on me. If I am making errors along the way and I'm not learning from them, then I shouldn't be in the seat that I'm in.
Raven, that's a wonderful point. And the continuous learning aspect of leadership is so valuable. And you embody that. And if you really listen to what you just said, you're saying you're learning from people that report to you, basically on your teams, equal stakeholders, folks at your level, and you're probably learning from people that you report to, right?
Absolutely.
So describe how valuable that is. And that sense of understanding and open-mindedness is so helpful to get us to where we want to go together, right? All doing this together.
Yeah, I'll use the example, and I talk about this in the book. When I first got my first leadership job, especially in sports, I was like, oh, I'm going to lead exactly how I was led. And it's nothing against the leader that I had or the leaders that I had, but early in sports, kind of the mantra was, you're lucky to be in that seat. If you didn't want to be there, there's 1,000 people waiting for you in line to sit in that seat. And fear isn't really the way that I lead, right? To be constantly on edge that I'm going to lose the seat that I'm in is not the mode that I would like to lead. That being said, when I got my first leadership job, that's how I led, because I didn't do the work to say what I wanted to be as a leader or how I wanted to live in leadership or how I wanted to serve in leadership. So I had to do the work. When I realized that that wasn't resonating with my team, many of whom were my peers, by the way, so I was leading my peers, I really need to focus on who is Raven as a leader? Who am I as a leader? Not who is the person that led me and what was their mantra. So I think the biggest thing I can say is if you're not evolving as a person, it's going to be hard to evolve as a leader. But if you're not asking the questions of what's going to work here, if I'm not hitting the mark or if this person isn't responding to me, what is it that I am not doing, right? Because you can only control so much. So you ask yourself, how much can I meet them in the middle such that they are successful? It's very important in leadership. I can't stress that enough, is evolution and asking the questions, why? Why are we doing this, right? I get to this level in sports and I could easily say, oh, well, we've always sold tickets this way. I've been selling tickets for almost 18 years now, right? Oh, this is how we always did it. If I'm not listening to people who come in and say, why don't we try it this way, then you're losing again.
And Raven, it's as you just said, it starts with us asking those questions. How are we coming across? Are we being our authentic selves? Are we being the person that we want to be? Not somebody that we knew 7 years ago, or not somebody I'm trying to emulate. Me, who am I? Well, hold on, and don't think I missed this. You referenced your book, and this must be so exciting for you. Let me get the title: More Than Representation, the Cheat Codes to Own Your Seat at the Table. Love that. It comes out this month, and it's exciting. Tell us about it. Tell us about why you wrote it, what it's about, and what are the takeaways for all of us that will read it.
Yeah. It's been a crazy journey. I'll start out by saying I never intended to write a book. I was being interviewed for someone else's book last year, and within probably 2 weeks, I had received the same question twice. So a mentee asked me, "How did you get here?" And people ask me about my journey all the time because it is unique, and I've had a great career in sports, and I usually say the same things, right? I started here, I worked hard, I met the right people, and that was not satisfying this particular mentee. This mentee wanted to know the actual steps. When you got to the Florida Panthers, how did you handle this, right? And there was a specific way that she was asking this question of me where I felt unprepared to give the answer. Fast forward a few days after that, I'm sitting in my office with our head of business strategy and analytics. She asked the same question with the same intent with respect to what she wanted the answer to be. So I'm like, okay, I don't believe in coincidences. I do believe in signs. Fast forward maybe another couple of days, I'm being interviewed for this book, and I'm talking to the author. She's taking my story, and then she stops recording, and she's like, "You have a book in you." And I was like, "No, no, 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 no. That's not what I do. I'm a leader, work in business. I hated English, grammar, all the things, right?" So I was like, okay, let me sit with this. There's something here that don't believe in coincidences. So I did what I thought made sense as a type A. And I go back to all my journals because I've been journaling since I've started in sports business. And some days I had great long entries, and some days I just had like, today was great, blessed to be able to see another great day and learn X, right? But I started reading, and this was a Friday. I started reading, and by Sunday, I really thought about, oh, wow, I've been through quite a bit, both ups, downs, sideways. Like, this is interesting. Following weekend, I start whiteboarding the journal, and I start whiteboarding like the stories that I saw connections in. And by the end of that weekend, I had what we have now as cheat codes, but they were themes. And I'm like, okay, I can't succinctly say this as an answer, but if I put it in a book, how would I do it? So the book is written in short story form. Each story is individually its own, but they tie under the cheat codes. That's intentional because I didn't learn lessons in leadership or life chronologically, right? So to say I was born in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and now I work for the Bucks and tell a story that way didn't make sense for me. I really want the reader to come away, whether they look like me or love like me or women in business or are people who are neither. I really want people to come away with the fact that people that you're leading alongside, people that you're leading every day, people that you work with every day are more than a checkbox. And I say this all the time. People will say that I got this role with the Bucks because I'm a diverse candidate, because I got it coming out of the George Floyd murder and all the racial reckoning that was happening back in 2020. And that's fine. I'm okay with that if that's how I got in this seat. But I can guarantee you what I do in this seat will not be because I'm a checkbox. And I really want people who, again, if they have experienced similar things to me, I want them to feel connected, and I want them to feel seen and know that there are options and there are ways that you can be authentically yourself in whatever seat you choose to be, whether it's an entrepreneur, whether it's, and I always say, yeah, I'm talking about owning your seat at the table, but that table could be your table. It could be someone else's table. It could be a table of rest. I talk about that in the book. Sometimes we think that we always have to be on. And the truth is, I have an entire cheat code dedicated to pausing, reflecting, and reinvesting because it was something that I needed to have done for myself such that I could remember who I am, know what value I add, and not lose myself in the process.
So when you do pause, Raven, and you think about writing the book and the process, and it's about to be released,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to get, I hope, a ton of attention, and I hope it's
Yeah.
New York Times bestseller.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. So in during that process, and you sit down and have interviews similar to this, but on bigger platforms, of course. What will be the takeaways? What will you want folks? I know it's in the book, but you can't have the whole book, right, in an
Right.
interview. But so what are some of the takeaways that you have in conversation where you go out to lunch or you have somebody from your team talking to you about it? What is the core that you really like, and not, and like you're saying, not
Mm-hmm.
force it upon people, but do it in a way that they can take it in, right? It's
Yeah.
about how people receive information. So how are you going to do that?
That's a great question, Chris. The first thing I would say is I want people to feel seen. I want those who come from marginalized communities to know that just because you weren't born knowing how to play the game doesn't mean you can't learn how to play the game. And if you fool yourself into thinking that business is not a game, life is not a game, you're going to be left behind. Quite frankly, I was someone as the second person in my family to graduate from college. I had no idea what the rules were. I thought you put your head down, you work really hard, you'll get promoted, and you'll be able to have life very successfully. I was wrong. And people were playing a game around me, and I felt like I was out of the loop. So the first takeaway is if you're in a marginalized community, and I'll break it down by, kind of each audience member as I think about this. If you're in a marginalized community, not only do I want you to feel seen, but I want you to feel like you have these cheat codes. I want you to feel like you have the ability to read this book and figure out how you can make that cheat code work for you in whatever situation you're in, but do so authentically as yourself. If you're not in a marginalized community, or if you're in a majority, or if you feel like, okay, like I feel like, I kind of know what to do and how to be, think about the teammates that you work with every day that don't look like you. And how do we really talk about inclusion and belonging in a way where people feel seen, but the people who are making decisions can actually feel like they're really tapping into and understanding who each of their employees are, who might be in marginalized communities. So if I break it out, in those two buckets, that's what I want the takeaway to be. And then, quite frankly, this was cathartic for me. Again, I never set out to write a book, but there's very personal things in this book, and how I traversed my career and climbed the corporate ladder, but also how I did it as myself.
And it's a combination, from what I'm hearing there, is working on self and understanding self, back to our original point, right, in the conversation,
Yeah,
which is that authenticity and that self-awareness, so that we can understand the journeys of others
that's
and
right.
have that true sense of empathy. If you're struggling here, how are you going to be empathetic? Because you're not, you haven't done the work per se, right? And
Yeah.
that's what you're saying. And the cathartic process of writing the book for you allows you to express this so clearly.
And one thing that you just hit on there, while the book isn't, you don't have to read it in chronological order. You can pick which cheat code you want to hit. But I did write the cheat codes in particular order for that reason that you just mentioned. Know yourself to know your worth is the first cheat code. Too often, people, especially those, like myself, who weren't given the rules, come into an environment where they might be the only one. They might be, and I call it the only one in space, but it's really a lonely space, especially when you're the only one who might be a Black woman or a woman, or, a minority. If you don't know who you are, they will tell you who you are. And by the time you make it to whatever destination you think you want to be in, you'll look back and you won't even know who you are when you get there. And that was something that was very intentional for me. I did not want to reach the heights of any career and think that I am somebody else, or have lost my way, my integrity, my character, um, to get there. So that cheat code, to your point just there, you can do all the things really good. But if you don't tap into really understanding who you are, the world will tell you who you are.
Raven, and this happens daily, right? And I like to say this a lot on this podcast, that these aren't just macro moments, right?
Right.
Giant boardrooms where these situations occur. These are subtleties and nuances of our daily life, how we're walking down the street, down a hall at the arena, right? So you're embodying this 24/7 all the time. So when you mentor folks and people in similar situations as you trying to do really well in their careers, how do you express this to people, perhaps, Raven, that aren't necessarily ready to hear it, but are on the cusp? At least they're asking the right questions, right? How do you approach those conversations?
Well, it's a great question. And I've obviously, mentored quite a few people at different levels in their career. What I say to them is, before you can ask me for any assistance, have you asked yourself how you can assist yourself? Or have you asked yourself who you're going to be in those moments when there's no one around and you don't have the answers? How are you going to handle those moments? And I usually ask that question in a way, especially because people are like, oh, I want to pick your brain about getting in sports business. And I want to pick your brain about, X, Y, and Z. And there's only so much you're going to get in my brain, right? You have to be able to collectively say what you want to be, how you want to be there, and what you want to give when you get there. I am very clear in mentorship that, to me, it's not only about the conversations that me and a mentee has. What are you going to do to give back to the next person? And you can't really mentor if you're being fake. And I'll say that very clearly. I think there's sometimes people feel like, again, that perch that they're on, that they got there authentically themselves. And I've seen it. Like they definitely have changed, or whatever the case may be. So I just want to make sure that whatever conversations I'm having, that I am giving you my authentic self. I'm very honest. I'm bluntly honest. I don't sugarcoat many things. And that's again, the reason why I wrote this book, because I felt like I was giving vague answers to some of the questions I was giving, and I wasn't being truthful on how hard it is to be yourself to get to these levels. So it's my long-winded way of me saying, you can pick my brain all day, but who do you want to be when you get to where you go? Like, have you figured that out? And as I'm sure you can imagine, there's usually some what we call couch moments in terms of therapy that comes from that. But I think there is a light bulb that goes off. And I honestly feel like a lot of the college graduates that I'm talking to and people entering the workspace these days are already starting to ask those questions of themselves, and they know exactly what they want out of their careers and the companies that they work for.
Isn't that encouraging?
It's awesome. I love it.
Isn't it though? It really is, right?
Yeah.
I'm fortunate to teach at NYU, and I teach college seniors, and you're right.
Mhm.
Raven, you're right. They are asking wonderful questions, and they're aware. And I always talk about how they're eager to learn and learn about themselves and how they're coming across in the world today. And I love that you just back that up with the interns, perhaps at the Bucks, or folks that
Yeah.
you're mentoring. Isn't that wonderful?
It is awesome. And that's because, information is readily available. I mean, I don't know how old you are, Chris, but I grew up in a world where there was encyclopedias. And if it wasn't in the encyclopedia, I wasn't really learning it, for example. And if I didn't open the encyclopedia, I certainly didn't learn it, right? Information is so readily available now for those entering the workplace. And I'm jealous, quite frankly. I wish I had that head start starting in business. But yeah, I think we're going to be okay.
You know what, Raven? I am old enough to have encyclopedias, plenty old enough. Encyclopedia Britannicas, my mom got them for us. I could still
That's
see them
right.
on the shelf. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Raven, I could talk to you forever, but I know you're a busy person. I will just ask one more question, then we'll get to the all-star round.
Sure.
What does the future hold for you? I know this book is going to come out. It's going to do really well. But what are some goals that you have for the Bucks, or perhaps just in totality, where you want to go in the next few years? I'm very interested because I think it's going to be great.
Thank you, Chris. Well, I would say my goal for the Bucks is to win a championship, because I can only take one season at a time. For myself, and this is something I had to learn during this process, the writing process, as well as kind of how this last 3 years and COVID has really changed my thinking. I used to be like, I want to be here in 3 years, 5 years. And truthfully, I've gotten to this level in my career relatively quickly. And I'm super blessed to have been able to do that. So I'm still fairly young, which means that my second act, I am being more intentional about how I want to serve, how I want to be remembered in service, which was something I wasn't really thinking about, quite frankly. So I'm answering the question kind of straddling in that I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that it will be one of service. And I do know that I have to take it kind of a few months at a time, because my type A brain will get me to 4 and 5 years. And then I'll start to get frustrated about, I'm not here, I'm not doing these things. So I've been intentional about taking it small chunks at a time versus thinking so big years out. Don't get me wrong, I definitely have goals that I want to accomplish in life, but I really just want to make sure that, especially having written this book, that service is at the center of whatever it is I do, because I believe that that is my purpose here on this earth. So whatever God puts me towards, that's where I'm going to go, and I'm going to follow through and hope that I do so at the highest level.
Yes, you will. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, are you ready for these all-star moments?
Oh, I'm a little nervous, but yeah, let's do it.
You nervous? I doubt it. Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go. They are a series of questions. You just answer first thought, best thought. But if you want to keep going on some, you may do so. Here we go. Number one, how do you deal with adversity?
Oof. Head on, take it on the chin, get knocked down, and really just try to learn from it. Obviously, it's an adverse moment in time, in that moment in time, but I can look back at every moment of adversity I've ever had and say that I learned something from it and that I'm better for it.
Boom. Two, how do you give yourself fuel?
Oof. Ooh, this is something that's new for me, resting. I call it do nothing days because my mom has called it do nothing days. So I try to pick one day a week. And sometimes, especially during the season, it's not always possible, but I try to pick one day a week where at least there's half a day where I do nothing. Meaning, if I want to nap, if I want to read, if I want to take the dogs for a long walk, if I want to listen to a podcast and not be bothered, if I want to just do absolutely nothing, I'm giving myself permission to do that. So that's how I refuel. And I try to do it on the weekend. If I'm lucky, I can do it on Sundays.
Valuable advice. Three, what does never give up mean to you?
I would say it means how you should handle life. If you get punched in the face and you get back up, it's a win. The punch in the face was a lesson. The punch in the face was a moment that you could say to yourself, I am better than whatever that moment is that punched me in the face, and I'm going to take that and do something more with it.
Wonderful. Four, what is the value of collaboration?
Everything. I can say, even though I personally wrote the book, there's nothing that I could have done by myself to get to this moment where I'm about to publish. Whether it was my editors, my beta readers, my wife, who is a writer and editor herself, giving me very harsh criticism. In life, it is everything. In work, it is more than everything. I can't imagine doing anything I do every single day without the partnership of my teammates that I get to sit alongside with every single day.
Outstanding. I'm not supposed to editorialize on these, but sometimes I just do.
It's all good.
Okay, five, hiring people. What do you look for in an ideal candidate?
Three things: intellectual humility, intellectual curiosity, and culture, and how you fit in our culture. So intellectual humility, you don't know everything, but you know that you don't know everything, and you're willing to say you don't. Intellectual curiosity, what you don't know, you're willing to learn. And then culture fit, we work in sports. It's not a 9 to 5, but it is fun. So can you fit in the culture, be able to, again, take the long hours, but really sit in the moments when we're in a full building or a concert sold out and say that you did what you needed to do to contribute to that moment.
Six, describe yourself as a leader in one sentence.
Service.
Seven, what is the difference between a manager and a leader?
A manager manages tasks. A manager, to me, tries to manage people, which you cannot do. A leader is someone who says, how do we get somewhere together? How can I lead you with me together to get there together? And how can I be a resource for you such that if I'm not in the front of the pack, you can get there by yourself?
Raven, this has been outstanding.
Thank you.
I can't thank you enough. This has just been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. This has been a great conversation. I can't believe it's over already.
How about this? We'll do it again in the near future. Okay. I wish you nothing but the best. Great luck on the book release. Continued success with the Bucks, and I'm glad I know you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank Raven very much for being on the show. I have more than one takeaway this week, everybody, but I will limit it to two. The first category is on mentoring. And Raven said, quote, "You can pick my brain all day, but who do you want to be when you get to where you want to go?" That's the question she asks her mentees. You have to do the work. It goes back to what we talk about on this podcast all the time. We all have to do the work, right? The mentor can't tell the mentee everything to do. There has to be accountability and work being done by the mentee. And as you just heard, Raven mentioned it many times. She's done the work herself. Quote, "You have to figure that out," she tells her mentees. My second takeaway is on the subject of what Raven looks for when she's hiring candidates at the Bucks. One, intellectual humility. You don't know everything, and you have to be aware that you don't know everything. Number two, intellectual curiosity, to have the ability to want to learn what you don't know. And number three, be a cultural fit. Know that sports is different. It's not the traditional 9 to 5. You got to work hard. You got to put in the hours and be a great teammate. Raven's advice, very valuable. Hope you enjoyed the conversation very much. We will have more information on Raven's book in the show notes. For our podcast and video producer, Jack Radutsky, I am Chris Gargano. Thank you each and every week for being part of Keep the Line Moving. Every week, you hear guests on this podcast talk about some of their biggest leadership challenges. As a leader, you want to make an impact on those you lead and reach your organization's goals, while also optimizing your time management. Wherever you are in your leadership journey, we could all use some help. This is what we focus on with our group and individual coaching services. To book a call or get more information, email me directly at chrisg@garganoleadership.com or visit our website at garganoleadership.com. For our podcast and video producer, Jack Radutsky, and our marketing coordinator, Savin Narwal, have a great week, everybody.